on a Wednesday evening here on VSiN PrimeTime, live from lovely Las Vegas. Boy, mwah, perfect day outside, but we're inside, ready to talk to you for the next 3 hours. That is Jonathan Von Tobel. I am Tim Murray. The straw poll, courtesy of Tim Bontemps at ESPN for NBA MVP, is out. We will have reaction on that. Ooh, a little controversy, courtesy of the Defensive Player of the Year. Maybe a little brouhaha from some VSiN personalities. We'll get into that, as well as Rudy Gobert still remains a minus 3,500 favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year. But I saw some folks getting a little testy on social media. So we will talk to our good friend and colleague Mitch Moss later on in this hour. We're one day closer to the Final Four. Some more thoughts on that. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the dream lives on for Indiana State as they took care of business last night in the NIT. But let's start with the blockbuster news of the day, Mr. Von Tobel. Stefon Diggs, adios for a second time in his career. Stefon Diggs, the former Maryland Terrapin, former Viking, now a former Buffalo Bill. He has been traded to the Houston Texans in exchange for a 2025 second-round pick via the Minnesota Vikings. In exchange, also a sixth-round pick this year and a fifth-round pick next year head to the Houston Texans, along with Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs, 445 receptions over the last 4 years while he was in Buffalo, and now a team that a lot of people believe could win the AFC, including yours truly, will now be missing their best weapon from a pass-catching standpoint moving forward in Stefon Diggs. And as was tweeted out, JVT, from the cap standpoint, this is going to get quite challenging for the Buffalo Bills, as last year Josh Allen's cap hit was $18.6 million. This year, $47.1 million. Stefon Diggs headed to the Houston Texans. More detrimental to the Bills or more positive for the Houston Texans when you look at it from a futures perspective?
I guess it's more positive technically for Houston, considering they went from 25 to 1 to 15 to 1 to win a Super Bowl at some spots. It's a move, by the way, that I would disagree with wholeheartedly. We talk about this all the time. Wide receivers should not impact odds like this when it comes to the probability of winning a Super Bowl. They're just not that impactful of a position. Now, moves like that are protection against liability, because that's going to build up, because it's a really sexy move. But in terms of, hey, man, the odds moving this much, like the literal odds, the probability of the Texans winning the Super Bowl because of Stefon Diggs, it's something that I would disagree with. So I think when you're talking about who's it most impactful for, I think obviously it would be Houston, because you get a receiver like this for a quarterback like C.J. Stroud. There's already some pretty solid talent at the skill positions. I think you don't want to overreact to something like this, though. And for Buffalo, it's the same thing, Tim. In a draft that is littered with wide receiver talent, and that we have talked about a lot, that does have some depth to it, you don't want to freak out too much, because while you're not going to replace it 1-to-1 for Stefon Diggs, who's a very talented player.
Minnesota did.
You can't. Well, here's the thing, because this is the point that I was going to get to. Stefon Diggs is, regardless or not, again, I always say this when I cite these numbers, regardless of how you feel about Pro Football Focus, it's one way to measure things. Stefon Diggs is coming off of his worst career, the worst grade of his career since 2016. In terms of a receiving grade, right? Lowest amount of touchdowns since 2019. We can go through the numbers. He was just not as impactful as he had been in years past. So there is a reason why you're willing to move on if you're the Buffalo Bills. So I don't think it's the end of the world here that he's gone for Buffalo, especially if you can get it right and draft a good receiver when it comes to the draft coming up at the end of the month. So while the odds would say it's more impactful for Houston, I'm not freaking out for Buffalo either, because I do think there's a reason why he is now, wearing a new uniform.
The Buffalo Bills, if you're wondering, do have 11 picks in this year's NFL draft, 28 overall in round 1, 60 overall round 2, 2 fourth-round picks. They have 3 fifth-round picks, 2 sixth-round picks, and a seventh-round pick. Once again, they do not get a selection for this trade this upcoming season. For Buffalo, we're still a long ways away. Dalton Kincaid continued to emerge as a a true star. And I would say fantasy implications, if you're looking ahead, that is going to be a player that his stock will continue to rise from a tight end perspective compared to around the league. I'm one that kind of believes that you don't get too, over excited for a move when it comes to a wide receiver. But you do wonder when you think about this Buffalo Bills team that at the end of last year, maybe playing some of their best football, ultimately, as we all know, lost to the Kansas City Chiefs at home. They've lost a lot of pieces so far from a core group that made a lot of noise. But at the end of the day, this seems like I don't want to say it's a rebuild because it's Josh Allen. He's still there, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But you're looking at a team in 2019, lost in the wild card round, lost in the conference championship in 2020. Then they lost in the divisional round. So 3 consecutive exits in the divisional round. This era of Diggs and Allen has to be looked at as a bit of a disappointment. Have you won the division a handful of times? Sure. And that is something that they struggled with mightily when the Patriots were running supreme there. But this is an organization that is still looking for its first ever Super Bowl victory. And it felt like, I don't want to say it was the last opportunity this past year, but they're going to have to now figure things out when you've got a quarterback who's got a cap hit 3 times the size of what it was from a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we talk about all the time with these teams, right? Is, the rookie deal is for the quarterback.
And that's what Houston started to interrupt, but that's what Houston's doing right now, right? Mm-hmm. They've got a massive cap hit with Stephon Diggs, but fortunately, you're entering year 2 of what looks like a budding star at quarterback in C.J. Stroud.
Yeah, and going back to that point, too, about Stephon Diggs, like, yes, you're trying to add to this window if you're, the Houston Texans. From week 6 of this regular season was Stephon Diggs' last 100-yard game. From week 7 onward, he averaged 51.2 yards receiving and had 3 total touchdowns. So, like, it's not – I think a lot of people would freak out and be like, this is awesome for Houston. And it might be. Maybe he comes back around. There was obviously some weird off-field, like, kind of push and pull behind the scenes. I remember there was that time at training camp where did he just leave at some point and they didn't know where he went and then he came back, whatever it was. But I think for both sides – as you talk about replacing him for Buffalo, it is imperative that you get it right from a draft standpoint now to get a receiver who can give you some sort of impact there. And when you talk about it from the Texans standpoint, it's imperative that you're going to get something out of him too, and you're not just trading for a receiver that is on the decline now at this point.
Stephon Diggs headed to the Houston Texans. We'll have more on this certainly as the show goes on. John Scott from Buffalo will join us in the third hour of the program. We will talk to Jim Root, our good friend. We'll get a Final Four preview from him coming up at the top of the next hour, 7 o'clock Eastern time. Thor Nystrom will talk some NFL draft with us. Another couple of mock drafts came out today, including Field Yates, Matthew Friedman, who has done a pretty nice job mocking and getting a good feel of the NFL draft landscape as we are 3 weeks away, 3 weeks from tomorrow away from the NFL draft. A lot of Bo Nix going number 12, making you scratch your chinny chin, making those odds that JVT and I have been just staring at, holding strong on under 4.5 quarterbacks, continue to tick upwards. Now up to 2-1, plus 200 on under 4.5. Let's get to this before we hit a break. We'll have our best bets a little earlier because Mitch Moss is going to join us bottom of the hour. Curious to get Mitch's thoughts on a handful of things, including Defensive Player of the Year. I'm just going to let him and JVT go at it. But the straw poll came out that we talked about yesterday. And what was your overall takeaway from the ESPN straw poll that was released earlier today? For those unaware, Tim Bontemps polls 100 voters. It is pretty indicative, especially this late in the year.
Real quick correction. It's every single one of these people does not have a vote.
Okay.
So it's not 100% of the voters. And look, there's such a lead that it's not going to, I think, matter. But if it was tight in future years, just for future reference, it's not all 100% people who have ballots,
which is important to know. But overall, what was your takeaway as the headline says the MVP race is over?
Well, the real takeaway actually is that
85 of the 100 votes, Nikola Jokic for number one.
Luka Doncic was not on every single ballot, and neither was Giannis Antetokounmpo. So those people are morons. That's the real takeaway: is how you how you say that there's 10 players who are playing better than those two guys at this point right now is absolutely insane. Now, having said that, The takeaway is, as we kind of discussed, and this is kind of the big picture here for these awards, we do this every year. And I'm going to look at the dynamic of Luka Doncic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Now, ultimately, it's not going to have an impact on this year's most valuable player. But, Tim, just again, remember this. When a player makes a late push for an award and people say, he could pass him, he could win this thing, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is still ahead of Luka Doncic. Now, it's only about by 140-ish votes, but still ahead. When you look at the odds would tell you Luka Doncic has a much better shot at winning this award than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Judging by the straw poll, that's not the case. Had 10 first-place votes, Shai did to 1. To me, that's the big takeaway. It's not so much that Jokic, who's now minus 1,600 favorite and deservedly so, should win this award. It's now let's take this as you move forward and remember, there's no late pushes for awards because you have to be there all year long. These are of-the-year awards. And a lot of the times voters stay true to what happens at the beginning of the year. People like to say the beginning of the year doesn't matter in the NBA, but it does, especially when it comes to some of these awards.
Well, we will talk more about that because the Defensive Player of the Year award is ratcheting up a lot of takes on social media, including from some of our own. Mitch Moss will get his thoughts on who should be Defensive Player of the Year. We'll have a little battle royale, him and JVT, bottom of the hour. But our best bets for tonight and maybe tomorrow night. A little hint, hint. Coming up next right here on VSiN Primetime.
This is VSiN Primetime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Get 2 weeks of free betting splits access up on the website of VSiN.com. Folks, check it out now. That's right, VSIN.com/splits. And you can get in on the action. Check out the money and bets for every single game, every single day, all for free. And data courtesy of DraftKings at VSiN.com/splits.
Also free, the first hour of this show each and every day on YouTube, youtube.com/VSiN Live. If you would like to, see the beautiful backdrop here at Circus Sportsbook and the lovely faces of these two hosts. That's Jonathan Von Tobel. I'm Tim Murray. You can always listen to us for free on our app, on our website, and of course on our many terrestrial affiliates across this country. Let's get to, before we get to our best bets, do have a handful of baseball games going on, so it's always fun to get a little day baseball in our lives. So across the league, the Milwaukee Brewers undefeated no more as they lost earlier today 7-3. Had a 3-1 lead, but unfortunately for the Brew Crew, they were handed their first loss of the season. We got extra innings going on in Arizona right now as the Yankees and D-backs all tied up at 4. And my Padres 3-1 lead over the St. Louis Cardinals. Every win counts.
Does.
Win total there.
I will always say it. People bury that, but it matters. It matters.
Every win counts. Just like in MVP and Defensive Player of the Year.
Can I make a baseball point really quickly?
Yes, you can.
I just want to say, and the guy ended up going 5 innings, so it turned out to be okay. But I'm just going to say that consecutive starts for Nestor Cortez, who took the L yesterday against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Big assumption for the Yankees, who, by the way, it's not like I'm making some great point because what are they, like 4-1 right now, 5-1? Hasn't really been great. Just going to point that out. There was just an assumption that Nestor Cortez was going to be, he'll turn things around. Everything will be fine. And through 2 starts, 10 innings pitched, he's given up 7 earned runs, has been taken deep once, and has walked 4 batters. So let's just keep an eye on that as we move forward. That's all.
We got a tweet. You could always tweet the show at @1TimMurray, at me, JVT. Mark Hoppel, frequent listener. Appreciate the interaction as always. He says, Wemby for DPOY and Nas for 6th Man of the Year. Mitch Moss out there tweeting a lot. Retweeting things. Trying to get it rolling.
I mean, as
Victor
somebody
Wembanyama yesterday, by the way, almost a triple-double. 23 points, 15 boards, 8 assists, 9 blocks. Almost a quadruple-double. And almost a triple-double as well. But almost a quadruple-double.
Yes. I was just going to say, as somebody who likes to spread Twitter propaganda himself, and at one point had changed his avatar to James Harden on like a little vote for me button. I'm totally down with spreading propaganda on social media. I did it for Jaren Jackson Jr. a couple years back when I had him at like 175-1 to win Defensive Player of the Year. He didn't win.
You finished second?
Second or third. He got 11 first-place votes. That's all I remember. Could have won it.
Almost got there.
Bastards.
All right. Well, we will talk about some fun discussions with Mitch Moss coming up bottom of the hour. Let's get to our best bets for this evening. As always, check out Mr. Von Tobel's write-up on VSiN.com each and every day, breaking down the NBA. One play for you on the website today for the association starts at 7:10 tonight in the nation's capital. How about them? Washington, don't call them lizards, beating the Milwaukee Bucks last night. No Kyle Kuzma, no Tyus Jones, catching 13. Giannis had a triple-double, and the Wizards still won, 117 to 113. Not great for the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah,
I'll just point that out there.
It was a pathetic performance from Milwaukee defensively, especially in transition. Look, this is shocking. It's been talk of the town here today for some reason. People are just realizing that NBA injury reports are pretty crowded when it comes to some of the names on there. Today, good luck, because almost every single player has, at least some key players that are going to alter the point spread, have some sort of designation. And LeBron James and Anthony Davis are no different. They're both questionable today to play. And on the second leg of a back-to-back, so generally, Tim, you would think like, oh, this is a negative spot. They're probably going to sit. However, Anthony Davis sat out the entire fourth quarter yesterday. LeBron James sat out the last 9 minutes and 30 seconds. Got to get their stuff ready to go and get their pregame, or their postgame habits, if you will, underway early. So Darvin Ham told the media yesterday, Tim, that both are going to play. I like 12.5, assuming that both are going to be out there on the floor today. So I'm believing what Darvin Ham and LeBron James and Anthony Davis are telling me, that they're going to be out there. If they do, that'll probably close about like 13.5 once they're officially ruled active again. They've been questionable for every single game. But from a matchup standpoint, Wizards don't really have much. I mean, you mentioned the stat line for Giannis. There's not going to be much resistance for both Anthony Davis and LeBron James here in this matchup. And the Lakers do take care of business against these opponents for the season. 18-5 with a net rating of about plus 8.9 against teams that are in the bottom 10 of non-garbage time net rating. Since the All-Star break, 5-0 against these teams with a net rating of about plus 13.2. So they take care of business against bad teams, not unlike the Milwaukee Bucks. I trust that they're both going to play, that they're going to take care of business here. And on a day that's filled with injuries, I felt that I was on the most steady ground, assuming that LeBron James and Anthony Davis are going to play here today. So Lakers minus 12.5.
Lay in the lumber with the Los Angeles Lakers. Wizards getting a win over the Bucks. It'll be packed there tonight. No. Actually, there'll be more Laker fans there than Wizard fans. I can almost guarantee you that. That's just the way that arena has been for years and years and years. For me, no play on anything tonight, but I'm going back to the well, baby. Last night, impressive performance by the Indiana State Sycamores, beating Utah 100-90. And was interesting to note, Indiana State, by the way, this is the NIT. I won't go too crazy in depth here. I do have some Final Four thoughts, almost close to a best bet on the Final Four. Might wait a little bit just to see if we can get maybe a better number. But for Indiana State, this is a team that's on a mission. I saw Robbie Avila, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Milk Chamberlain, however you want to, whatever nickname you want to give him. He was on the McAfee show today, just saying, hey, man, we want to finish this thing off. We were disappointed, but they have shown how well they have played. Seton Hall's played well too, but I do think you get a little, you're paying the tax again for this game being at Hinkle Fieldhouse at Butler. It's going to be a packed environment, mostly Indiana State fans. And I love this offense. They've been playing at a ridiculous pace. The way they've been shooting the ball. Actually didn't shoot the ball all that well from three. Were deadly inside the arc yesterday. But I think they take care of business tomorrow night. I will lay the minus 150 money line, which is readily available. That is a best bet for me come tomorrow night. By the way, if you're looking at the website right now, the vsin.com/picks page, don't get confused. Yesterday on the show, we gave out Indiana State on the money line and Indiana State-Purdue money line parlay. That is not tomorrow's Indiana State game. Might get a little confusing, but Indiana State tomorrow, minus 150 against Seton Hall. We'll have plenty of time to talk Final Four, but I just wanted to point this out real quickly. I am almost there. I actually did lay a little 8.5, but for a best bet perspective, JVT, you kind of hit on it. I'm waiting. There's a shop here in town that's minus 8.5, minus 105, so you're paying less juice. Maybe we get an 8 out there on Purdue. I just want to make this mention, and I heard our good friend Will Hill and Chris Felica talking about it on Felica's podcast. Opponents this NCAA tournament against NC State, and I'm not trying to crap on the Wolfpack. You guys have been an improbable run. But how about the fact the opponents are shooting 24% from three? To put that in perspective, the best three-point shooting defense in the country for the whole year was 28%. 28 of 177 from three. Texas Tech was 7 of 31. Oakland was 12 of 35. That game went to overtime, and our guy Jack Golke did not have the performance that he had against Kentucky, so a little bit of a drop-off there. He went 6 of 17 in that game. Marquette went 4 of 31. Go watch that game again. They had wide-open looks. And then Duke went 5 of 20, even though I think the Duke game, to be honest, I thought they lost that game from a defensive standpoint, was DJ Burns went absolutely off. So I like Purdue. I have laid it, but it's not an official play yet because I'm going to wait and see if we can get maybe an 8 to show up, because it does seem like the public sentiment does like the NC State Wolfpack here in this one.
Yeah, haven't bet anything. I'm waiting, but it'll be Purdue. It'll be the Boilermakers. And I think it's worth pointing out because a lot of people would be like, well, NC State's defense is just really good. No, it's good. They're contesting shots. You can only do so much in terms of perimeter defense, in terms of contesting a shot, and then once the ball leaves somebody's hand, right, it's up to God whether or not that thing's going to go in. And when you're talking about a short sample size in neutral settings, it's a pretty solid variance that has worked in NC State's favor. The great thing, Tim, is guess what? It can continue to work in their favor.
Yeah.
Purdue could come out and shoot like crap, and they go on to win, to get to the national championship. Same thing can happen for UConn, but it is a very important factor to look at and go, okay, how much of this is due to tight perimeter defense? Some of it, but not that extreme of a low when it comes to three-point shooting for opponents.
How about this, though, real quickly? Our friend Patrick Everson just tweeted this out, a quote from someone over at BetMGM. NC State has swept the nation. The Wolfpack are attracting a lot of bets on the money line, spread, and in the futures book. They are currently, NC State, the largest futures liability at BetMGM. So just take that for what you will. Public's been eating good in the neighborhood, just like DJ Burns yesterday at Applebee's when everyone showed up there in Raleigh to get some autographs. All right, best bets for us. Lakers minus 12.5 for Mr. Von Tobel tonight. That game starts a little after the top of the hour. Tomorrow night, Indiana State on the money line minus 150. Should Victor Wembanyama win Defensive Player of the Year? We're going to have a heated debate with Mitch Moss next.
This is VSiN Primetime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Check out the website at VSiN.com. There's a ton of great content up there, including Wes Reynolds' preview of the Valero Texas Open. We've also got a look at Live Miami from Wes as our two headline stories. But don't worry, plenty of other coverage as well. Best bets from Adam Burke in Major League Baseball, NCAA Final Four betting trends from Steve Makinen, and the day's slate of action in both the NBA and NHL. Check it out now, VSiN.com.
And you would read about JVT's best bet for tonight. Lakers laying the chalk, minus 12.5 against the Washington Wizards. That game coming up top of the hour. As mentioned, that's Jonathan Von Tobel. I'm Tim Murray. We are VSiN Primetime, which you can watch for free every first hour. YouTube.com/VSiN Live. And every weekday morning here on VSiN, you can catch Follow the Money with Mitch Moss and Paulie Howard. And Mitch Moss joins us right now on a progressive guest line. All right, Mitch, let's just jump right into it. You're tweeting away on some Defensive Player of the Year discussion. You and Paulie seem to be aligned. So give us your pitch why Victor Wembanyama at 12-1 should be in more discussion for Defensive Player of the Year.
Well, if you would have asked me last night what I would have been doing at 2 o'clock Pacific time today, the last thing I would have said was, passionately defending this award and telling you why I think it's a joke that Gobert is minus 5,000, but a lot of stuff happened like last night into today, and people have been talking about it, and it just drives me nuts to hear this narrative on Gobert like he is the runaway favorite when it makes absolutely no sense to me. And I need to preface this by saying, and this is fun because some dude just blocked me who claims he's been scouting and watching NBA films since 1979. Evidently, I angered him on Twitter. All year long, I've been hearing, well, he's got the best defensive rating in the NBA. So when I told that to him, that's all I've heard all year long. He's like, oh, you're such a casual for bringing that up. Well, then present me some better numbers and a better argument with Gobert because if you look at individual defensive rating in the league and Gobert is number 1 overall, who's number 2? It's Victor Wembanyama. Who has 4 other players in the top 16 across the league? It's the Minnesota Timberwolves with no other Spur anywhere close or even in the neighborhood. And then when Wembanyama is on the court, the Spurs have the 4th best defensive rating in the NBA. When he's off the court, it drops to 28th. Again, I don't even have a big ticket on Wembanyama. I'm trying to argue for what's right here. The mainstream numbers, they're not even close. And I've been saying like for 2 months now, the Spurs stink and he's got nobody good on his team. If you would flip Gobert and Wembanyama, then what are we talking about? Wembanyama would be minus $20 million.
So my question for you, Mitch, would be then like, because I've been listening to this. I know Gil's been pretty passionate about this too, because he's got his own tickets in this. Do you, like, if Rudy Gobert were to win it, is this some sort of travesty? Because where I'm kind of coming from, which I told Gil today on a numbers game, was I feel like these impassioned cases for Wembanyama are kind of forgetting still how good and how impactful Rudy Gobert has been for the best defensive team in the NBA.
Okay, that's he has been. But again, what about when he has elite defenders around him pretty much the entire game? Like if you watch games, Anthony Edwards is not just an awesome offensive player. Like he is elite defensively. I can't believe Karl Anthony Towns is ranked 3rd overall defensive rating. Other guys like Jaden McDaniels is outstanding. And Edwards talked about that earlier in the year with the win over the Celtics. Like, dude, when that game went to overtime, they tried to go one-on-one on McDaniels the whole game, and they got nothing in that contest. And also, I'll take you back to a game like late last week. It was March 29th. And Dana Moore tweeted this out, who covers the NBA. And he recalled the game last year in Denver when Naz Reid started that game because Gobert was injured. And he asked him in the locker room after that game about the Joker matchup. And Naz Reid told him, quote, "I'm going to figure it out." Well, in the game last week, Gobert played. Guess who started the game on Joker? It was Naz Reid, and he started, Joker did, 5 of 15 from the field. So Naz Reid is a guy I haven't even talked about or ranked in the top 16 because he comes off the bench. And this is for what it's worth. A buddy of mine, he's the biggest diehard Timberwolves fan you're ever going to meet. Like, he's watched like 90% of their games since they came into existence. I'm not joking. He's been telling me that Naz Reid is actually their best center overall, and he's better than Towns overall as a player and better defensively than Rudy Gobert is. So to me, it's just, I don't know, it's infuriating. It reminds me a lot, the number does in the market right now, reminds me a lot of Jalen Carter this year for the Eagles for Defensive Rookie of the Year. And I had a ticket on him. He was the first guy that I bet. I'm yelling on the air. The guy can't even play 50% of the snaps, and the Eagles' defense is horrendous. Why is he minus 20,000? It makes no sense. And the voters got that right. He eventually did not win the award. My goal is here, I hope voters actually get this right and don't give it to Gobert.
Yeah, and I don't know if you listened to Windhorse latest podcast too, Hoop Collective, but they brought this topic up, and Tim Bontemps and Tim McMahon, his colleagues over there at ESPN, I think the quote was no shot that Victor Wembanyama is going to win this. And that's the other thing working against you here, right? It's the old guard, the old heads of essentially, hey, a rookie can't win this. And there's also the thought of this established dominance of Rudy Gobert over the years, because it's not like this is the first best defensive team Rudy Gobert's been on, and it's something that I don't think Victor Wembanyama is going to be able to overcome.
No, and I tried to listen to the podcast today, a Brian Windhorst podcast, by the way, and he could not get out what he was trying to say because the other guys kept interrupting too much.
Yep.
And I don't know if you recall, JVT Bontemps kind of misled people last year on the podcast as well, talking about a player for the Miami Heat who was going to win the Eastern Conference, MVP.
Sure.
And then he changed his mind and he changed his vote when he basically said the exact opposite on the podcast. So I'm like, well, how do you get away with that? And he had this condescending look on his face today. I'm like, and he kept bringing it up, well, it's been him all year long. That's great. Wembanyama is, how much stock do we put into the steals and blocks category? Because it's not even close. So, does that mean anything? And the narrative also that I can't stand is that plenty of people have brought up, this is going to be Wemby's award after this year. He's going to win it almost every. What does that have to do with anything?
Yep.
What, can't win it this year because he's a rookie? That goes back to Joker, people voting against Joker to win MVP last year because, he's really got to be historically good because he can't win 3 straight MVPs. Like, what? What is that supposed to mean? Why can't he? So just the stuff that you hear from NBA media is maddening.
Mitch Moss joining us here on VSiN Primetime. Of course, you can catch him and Paulie Howard every weekday morning on Follow the Money from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Mitch, I don't know when the news officially came across, if you guys were still on the air, but the Stefon Diggs news, I'm curious if we can get a little your initial thoughts on the Stefon Diggs trade. So Josh Allen now will be without his top wide receiver, but as we discussed a little bit, and JVT hit the points of, look, it wasn't like Stefon Diggs was lighting the world on fire this year. His numbers were down, and clearly there was some issues in that locker room, and they've been brewing for a couple of years. So what did you make of the Texans' acquisition of Stefon Diggs and also the Bills letting him walk here for, I don't want to say pennies on the dollar, but they're eating a pretty big cap hit this year, and they're getting a second-round pick in 2025 in return.
Well, they certainly are, although the second-round pick I thought was actually pretty good. I'm happy here short-term because I did bet during free agency when they were gobbling up awesome players. I bet the Texans at 16-1 to win the AFC. That was the one bet that I made. I had to. So I think they're completely loaded. I think you can make a case that they're the second-best team now in that conference. And I did see a really good tweet today from an NFL fantasy guy who was asking around about Joe Brady as their OC in Buffalo. And one person told him, quote, he's not very well respected about the league because he doesn't know how to scheme guys open. And he pointed out that in 2020, DJ Moore finished as Carolina's wide receiver 3 behind Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel. In PPR, Joe Brady was there in Carolina. In 2023, pre-Brady, Diggs was averaging 86 yards per game, wide receiver 9. Post-Brady, 2023, he averaged 45 yards per game. So I think the point is here that maybe he's not completely done, and when he goes somewhere else, he's actually going to be able to, find his way. And the one thing that I'm concerned about, though, is that this has been now 2 stops for Stefon Diggs, and it's kind of happened at both of them, right? So what's going to happen this season, if things are just not going his way, that we've seen with, guys playing the wide receiver position in years past who have massive egos? Teams could be winning games, but if they're not getting the ball, they're not going to be unhappy about it. So I'm a little concerned about that aspect for sure.
All right, last 60 seconds. So I'm going to bring you back to the NBA really quickly. Are you Naz Reid 6th man of the year as well?
I think he's got a great shot, doesn't he?
Yeah. I think Malik Monk should not be the odds-on favorite given the fact that he's going to miss the last 7 games. I think the margins are really tight between him, Norm, and Naz Reid.
Yeah. And I wonder how much Malik Monk, how much that equity was built up, until this final stretch here where we got hurt. And, the chase for Naz Reid to actually catch him and surpass him in the voters' mind is obviously big. And it's, if for vetting the stuff, it does come down to what voters are tweeting and what they're talking about it as well on podcasts. And I don't know how much this is going to carry, but Draymond Green said today that, on this podcast that he would vote Wemby as Defensive Player of the Year.
He doesn't know that much.
Draymond.
He also hates Rudy Gobert, though, Mitch. We should point that out. He did choke Rudy Gobert out. He might have a little bit of it. Something to burn there.
Good point.
Mitch, always appreciate it. We'll hear you in the morning.
All right, JBT, thanks.
There he is, Mitch Moss. Catch him tomorrow morning, of course. Follow the money here on VSiN. Joins us on a progressive guest line. Wemby for DPOY. The battle has begun. A primetime primer next.
This is VSiN Primetime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
There's never been a better time to have skin in the game, folks, than with DraftKings Sportsbook. And right now, we got a VSiN exclusive offer for new DraftKings customers. You can earn a $500 bonus bet for every $1,000 you wager. You can earn up to $2,500 worth of bonus bets in your first 3 days on DraftKings. So don't wait. Download the app now. Use code PRIME when you sign up. Earn a $500 bonus bet for every $1,000 you wager.
Coming up top of the hour, Jim Root, 3-man weave, boots on the ground down there in Phoenix, Arizona. How about Jim's travel itinerary? Came out to Vegas from Chicago for 2 weeks. First round, second round, Sweet 16 Elite 8. Joined us in studio last week. And then just flew right down to Phoenix. Now, I believe he has some family down there, but it sounds cooler when you just say, man, Vegas, Phoenix, never going home. but he will join us, get us his thoughts of the Final Four and maybe some player props to keep an eye on. I was listening to his podcast with the Weave yesterday, and there were some player props that intrigued the fellas. All right, recapping the best bets before we get a little primetime primer for tonight. For me, it's not a neat this evening play, but gonna go back to the well with Indiana State. Lay the -150 money line with the Sycamores as they play Seton Hall tomorrow in the NIT Championship. About to get there, just not there yet, just patient on on Purdue. Speaking of Indiana, as our good friend Chuck Esposito from Stations Casino told Patrick Everson, quote, early action on this game has clearly been on NC State. The betting public loves a Cinderella. So early action at books, a number of books have been on NC State. So maybe we'll get a little Purdue on sale here. But I do like Purdue. Will be on Purdue. Just waiting for the number. There is one 8.5 out there. For you, Mr. Von Tobel, we've seen a little movement in your favor. Hashtag sharp card. So your play tonight is what?
I lay 12.5 with LA, and that's just the bump you're getting from LeBron and Anthony Davis being ruled in as active. So kind of as we expected, right? You can kind of play that game where you can not guarantee yourself, but you can kind of get, steal some closing line value, if you will, if you kind of follow and read the tea leaves. And knowing that LeBron James and Anthony Davis essentially did not play the fourth quarter yesterday, you knew that they were probably going to give it a go here today. They want to maintain pace, of course, in the Western Conference, and especially when you're talking about the play-in dynamic there at the bottom of the West and trying to stave off the Golden State Warriors for, at the very least, home court
Getting
in
hot.
that second play-in. The Lakers, they're playing very well. Or the Warriors, too. Yes. Yes, they won 5 straight big win yesterday over the Dallas Mavericks. And for the Lakers, they have won, I think it's like 6 out of 7, or 6 out of 7, 7 out of 8, something like that. But regardless, you'll get a plenty motivated team. And as we mentioned before, a team, when you look at the net rating against teams that have a bottom 10 net rating, Lakers have taken care of business. 18-5 against those teams for the season. 5-0 with a +13 net rating since the All-Star break. They will not, I would assume, fall asleep at the wheel much like the Bucks did yesterday.
Oof, brutal.
That was a bad performance, man. Watching that back and looking at how bad they were in transition defense, Tim. The Wizards yesterday had an offensive rating in transition of 150. Like, it was just brutal. You're watching Wizards players just sprint back down the floor and beat guys, and Bucks players looking around and flipping their hands up. And you can't be, even with Damian Lillard out there, I don't really think, maybe I'm wrong, you can correct me, I don't think transition defense and Damian Lillard go hand in hand, right? Like, that's not a symptom of missing Damian Lillard. You should be better than that, and they were not good. By the way, speaking of Damian Lillard and Chris Middleton, both out today. For the Milwaukee Bucks, Miles Turner out as well.
Corey Kispert had 27 points against the Milwaukee Bucks, and Denny Avdia had 23 in the victory for, don't call them the Lizards. The Wizards, 15-61, the triumph that is the Washington Wizards. Before we get to that primetime primer, Jim Root, top of the hour, I didn't get your opinion. So we had Mitch Moss on, very strong opinion, kind of a Taylor Twellman type of what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Impassioned plea of Victor Wembanyama, who is sitting at 12-1 at DraftKings to win Defensive Player of the Year, minus 3,500 of the current odds for Rudy Gobert. What do you think should happen in Defensive Player of the Year?
I mean, I think that Victor Wembanyama should probably finish second. Rudy Gobert should finish first. But I don't think there's this massive gap between these two. And I think when we talk about all of these, like, lost in this conversation is, like, Rudy Gobert should not be discounted for having good individual defenders around him, because he himself is still a very good individual player in terms of what he brings to the table defensively. It's not like this is the first time that Rudy Gobert has been the center for a team that has finished at the top of the league in defensive rating, right? That he's been the center point of a defense like this for many, many years. So to discount his prowess as a defensive player because of that, I think is missing the mark there. I think for Victor Wembanyama, if you want to cite the blocks and the steals and whatnot, especially when it comes to the blocks, you and I were talking about this off the air, when you have a bunch of poor on-ball defenders who are just funneling their guys into you as a defender, you're going to have a lot of opportunities to block a lot of shots. And with your length, he is racking those up at a really high rate. But I wouldn't overwhelmingly put that stock into that over what Rudy Gobert does. Rudy Gobert averages more defensive rebounds, defensive win shares. He is better than him. On-court defensive rating, he is better than Victor Wembanyama. And I'll just put it this way. If Wembanyama wins, I'd be like, all right, cool, I get it. If Rudy Gobert wins, I'd be like, all right, cool, I get it. I don't think it would be this travesty if Rudy Gobert were to win this award. And I think that's where my disconnect comes from when it comes to like having conversations with Mitch or anybody else. It's like if either one of them were to win, I would understand. But this is not like, I go back to Tim, the year that Marcus Smart won Defensive Player of the Year. To me, that's a travesty.
That was bad.
Robert Williams should have won that year. The fact that he won it was Williams got injured, and the voters were like, well, we got to give it to a Celtic. Let's give it to the guy who's now stunting for this award now that his teammate is out. That's a travesty. That's something that shouldn't happen. But I think that because we all get entrenched in our sides in any single kind of debate, you kind of start to get this. If this doesn't happen, this is completely wrong. I'm more of the camp of like, yeah, if either happens, I totally kind of get it if it's going to happen. So if it were me, like if I had the ballot, like I'd vote for Rudy Gobert because from what I have watched, I think his on-court impact is massive, and I think it is deserving, especially when you are a center figure of a best defensive team. But again, I'm not firing up the torches and the pitchforks if Victor Wembanyama ends up winning this award because it's totally understandable. He's had a great defensive year.
Couple other games to get to tonight. Last night we saw the market move like crazy, and we will get a little bit of a rant from JVT, a grind my gears type of thought process regarding the injury reports in the NBA. Yesterday was just a joke with Joel Embiid being ruled out and then, oh yeah, he's going to play. Market went crazy, and you actually could have middled the Oklahoma City-Boston game last night. Oklahoma City back at it tonight, and once again, JVT, they will be without Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams. For Boston, Jaylen Brown was listed on the injury report. He's available to play. So we got a big old number there. Boston laying 12.5 against the Oklahoma City Thunder. This game going to start at 7:40 Eastern time in Boston.
Yeah, this is the theme of the write-up today, and then the theme of just everything when it comes to the day of NBA notes, which was just like, you got to make sure that these guys are going to be available. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has been dinged up, and his health is massively important. And for a team like Boston, who has depth on depth, it's not going to be that massive if Jaylen Brown ended up not playing. So he's not going to be out there. But to me, it's going to be Celtics or nothing here. Look, when you don't have Shai, when you don't have Jalen Williams, you are very shorthanded in terms of individual creators offensively. There's not going to be a lot there for you. And you could totally foresee a scenario where you kind of get bombed out here. And you see the writing on the wall, which is if Shai is not playing, the message is we need him to be healthy. And then, by extension, let's get to the postseason healthy. So I'm not saying that this team's going to lay down by any stretch. But when you talk about the ability to create against one of the best defenses in the NBA, it's going to be a problem for you here without Shai or Jalen Williams. So it would totally be Celtics or pass. But again, we've seen this a bunch of times. So let the game start. If the Thunder get off to a 7-2 start or whatever it is, 10-3, you'll be able to get a cheap in-game number, lay it there with the Boston Celtics.
Another game you mentioned injury-wise, Miles Turner has been ruled out for Indiana. They're still laying 7 against the Brooklyn Nets. This game also tipping off 7:40 Eastern.
Yeah, so I put it this way when I wrote it up. So when you looked, they met in Brooklyn just the other day, or excuse me, in Indiana the other day. Pacers were laying 12.5 points. As we've discussed, 2.5 points worth of home court so far this year. At least that's how I've been measuring it. That measures to about a 7.5 point spread in Brooklyn. All right, that's right where we're at here. Difference is, though, is that Miles Turner played in that game, right? So that we're using that number with a Miles Turner on the floor as your barometer. Here, Miles Turner's not going to play, and we're essentially where we were at in a game that has him. So, again, you're making the case here that there's been an adjustment. The numbers kind of ticked up from a rating standpoint on Indiana or been lowered for Brooklyn. You as a better have to make the distinction of whether or not that adjustment is worth it. As we've discussed before, Indiana's been kind of inconsistent, but do you want to get in front of the train with a Brooklyn Nets team that's 3-8 against the spread in their last 11 games and seems to be very much ready to, hit the pavement and head out?
Yesterday, prior to the Bucks' stunning loss to the Wizards, Doc Rivers said, you might see Damian Lillard tomorrow, meaning today.
No.
Yeah, he's not playing. Damian Lillard out, Chris Middleton out. Still, Milwaukee laying 12.5 against the Memphis Grizzlies. Against the Memphis Grizzlies. That game starting in the 8 o'clock Eastern
Trust them if you want.
Hour. That's JVT. I'm Tim Murray. 1 hour in the books. We head to Phoenix, the site of the Final Four, and get some best bets from Jim Root.